Well, most of us as South Africans are familiar with the phrase state capture, state of capture. But what about state failure? Is it that far off? Is the executive hell-bent on defending illegality, as we saw with the failure to arrest the Sudanese president Omar al-Bashir, the lack of justice, the arrest in the Marikana massacre, the Sassa saga, Life Esidimeni, where more than 100 mentally ill patients lost their lives, and the failure, of course, to hold President Jacob Zuma to account after Nkandla beyond paying back some of the money. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. I'm joined by Zwelinzima Vavi, social activist, lifelong trade unionist, to talk about the cost of state failure. Do you think we're headed to state failure?
We're going there. I mean, in every respect, we're slowly towards a total failed state, and with all of the consequences for ordinary people and for everybody in the Republic. And you mentioned some of the failures. I mean, the list is longer than you can remember. We forget these things. They happen in such velocity and frequency that you just forget. And today seemed to be worse than yesterday. And when you said that yesterday was what breaks the camel's back, and you suddenly find something else that is worse than what you thought it would be worse.
Is it conceivable to you, would it have been conceivable to you, that we came to the brink of failing to pay 17 million social grants to 10 million people who live on a knife edge of security, dependent on a state grant every single month? Could you believe what played out recently in terms of the mess around Sassa, the mess around Net1 UEPS, the mess around the Department of Social Security?
There's no day that I don't think about what would Nelson Mandela or O.R. Tambo wake up and say about the state of affairs inside the ANC and the whole alliance, and as a consequence the rest of the Republic of South Africa. There's no day I'm not asking myself, and I know that I've beaten myself and about my own role in helping
in the elevation of Jacob Zuma into office. Yeah.
But every day I said, who would have anticipated that he will do what he was doing in Parliament the other day, and the last time he was there, where he deliberately simplify a matter where he's actually in defiance of the highest court of the land. And he makes it as if it's just a matter of we will pay on the 1st of April, that's it. Who would have thought that all of what we're talking about will be possible under the leadership? Let's say, fine, he was not the right person for the job, but he was the deputy president of the ANC. He was the former deputy secretary general. He was the chairperson of the ANC, important province of KwaZulu-Natal, a member of the National Executive Committee for 20 years, and a respected individual, head of intelligence. How could things be falling to this where they are at this moment under the leadership of people who were prepared to put everything of their lives in the line for the benefit of all South Africans? It's a shocker, it's unbelievable, it's like living in a hell of a dream.
How much of it is directly Jacob Zuma, and how much of it is more serious and deeper than that? Because if it is only about Jacob Zuma, well, that problem is easily solved.
Of course.
But it's bigger than that, though, isn't it?
It's not him. And I've long said that even if you can remove Jacob Zuma tomorrow, you're not going to have solved the problem of state capture or Guptarization of this economy, or inefficiency or wrong deployment in state-owned enterprises, or eating in the local government, provincial. I think they wouldn't have gone far too broad and too deep for us to continue to say Jacob Zuma, Jacob Zuma. No, the problem is not Jacob Zuma. The problem is the ANC leadership that was put together in 2007, reinforced in 2012, and who kept on getting large support from the population. 11 million people voted for the ANC in the last local government election, and so dealing with one individual is not solving any South Africa's problem. You can go home and clap hands that we've dealt with the chief culprit, but no.
So what is the solution? I mean, come December 2017, the ANC has new leadership, and that can go in one of many directions as people put up their hand for leadership. And depending on who that leader is, it might set a new tone for the ANC. But it takes a long time to remedy a broken system.
I'm writing a report to the launching Congress of the new federation taking place on the 21st of April. And that forces you to think and to again look at what has been happening in some level of detail. And I'm generally an optimist, and I like to look brighter into the future and not to overwhelm myself with negativity and or with fear. But I must say, writing that report makes me to wonder what is it in for South Africa moving forward. Let me give you a few scenarios. What if in April, May, the Supreme Court of Appeal, followed by the Constitutional Court, says to Jacob Zuma, you have to go and stand trial for the 783 charges.
Yep.
What will he say? What do you think is going to be the response of the today's ANC Youth League, the Women's League, the MKVA, the KwaZulu-Natal
How
province?
influential is the ANC Youth League, the MKVA, and the ANC Women's League? They're very noisy, but how influential are they really?
They have backers in what is called the Premier League. They've got KwaZulu-Natal, they've got Mpumalanga, they've got Free State, they've got the Northwest, and they've divided every other province. And in my own calculation, knowing the game having been in there, they will win the conference in 2017. But even before we go to 2017, what if they send us into a crisis now and march into the streets? They march 20,000 of them to APSA over a report that is not on the table. 20,000. What if they were to be told by Jacob Zuma that I will not go stand trial over a judicial system that have been captured by white monopoly capital I'm defying? What do you think they will do?
He's teed up very cleverly
Absolutely.
the game plan for that scenario, because he knows it's possible and likely that he will be asked to go and stand trial.
Absolutely, and that I fear that this crowd who have everything to lose if he goes into prison, because that will open floodgate for them to be charged for what is currently happening in South Africa. And I think that we may be forced into some conspiracy right now, some situation which we cannot get out of. 2017, if the current balance of forces, as I see them, maintains themselves, they're going to go through. But for me as a worker leader, the issue is what is in for
But that's the consequence. So we have a political failure at the very. Let's say we have political failure and we have an ANC that splits. You have half the cabinet walking out and saying we can't. We are going to do Cope Mark II or whatever. Hopefully more successfully. But the ANC splits, and that's the big threat. I think that's what's keeping Gwede Mantashe awake at night, is the threat to the unity within the ANC. The only thing that's possibly keeping the top six, keeping the president in power right now.
I'm working for an independent movement now that have learned from the crises that have been unfolding for the past 22 years. I honestly don't care about the factional battles within a house that everybody is responsible inside that tent, as far as I'm concerned, is responsible for lighting it up and putting diesel and petrol to get it into flames. But I know even in that context, what is going to be a scenario that is going to be worse for South Africa. Let me tell you what is the scenario worse for South Africa, is if Jacob Zuma takes us into a civil war before even 2017, if the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court order that he goes to trial. That's a worse one. The second one is that if he wins the conference in 2017 and get rid of all of the people who are starting to voice their concerns inside the ANC, and by January install a new Minister of Finance, and therefore he captured the Treasury, he captured the Receiver of Revenue, the SARS, and then we cut and dry. We're straight into a predatory state. At that moment, we've arrived at the kleptocratic order.
That's the dark side of your research. You say you're an eternal optimist, however. What's the upside of this one?
The upside have been that South Africa must ask themselves a fundamental question. We've been here for 20 years. Some of us as guilty as charged because we have assisted in a way to get South Africa where it can now have 9 million of its people unemployed. 1 in 4. I mean, that's a disaster. What do we do? The question is, what is to be done. We can't just say we will march, we will threaten this and this and this. It has not worked for 23 years. Nuclear is coming. We see what the Denton report says about the state of affairs in Eskom. We know what is happening in Brasa. We've seen what have happened in DNL. We know what is happening in SAA and SABC. And we know what happened in Petro SA. The question is, with everything that have happened, what do ordinary South Africans do to stop nuclear, to stop the state capture, and to stop these guys from driving us into a kleptocracy? And that's the question that we're starting a discussion on in April, and we believe that this is a discussion that must be broadened up to involve every other true Democrat who loves this country dearly, in order to find an answer about what do we do. We've done everything. We've marched, we've called strikes, we've called stayaways countless times. They did not stop the train from taking the direction that it has taken. What else should we do? It's a fundamental question to me that I think must keep us all engaged at night in order to find an answer to.
18 months ago, most people would have gone, "Oh, Zwelinzima Vavi, please. I mean, have you had a drink before you came on before you came on TV?" Now, a lot of people, more people, and I think that's why this process is healthy, will say, "This Zwelinzima Vavi guy is talking sense. We're afraid for the future."
We should be afraid for our future, but we can't just give it away without a fight. And that's why we're talking to civil society very quietly behind us to ask the question, what else should we do?
Yeah.
How do we stop this nuclear? I mean, where do we get 1 trillion to 2 trillion rands when we don't even need extra energy? Which is this nonsense is pure a grand scheme to loot and to eat for generations whilst mortgaging the country into another country. We have to stop it.
We have to stop it, and we have to stop this right now. Zwelinzima Vavi, thank you so much. My producers are shouting at me in my ear. Zwelinzima Vavi, former trade unionist, convener of the new Trade Union Federation now, presenting some very, very significant and very serious issues and the potential dark underbelly of a South Africa if that plays out the way he suggests it very well might. He's somebody who's battle-hardened, he's somebody who's seen these battles before. That's one of the scenarios that has been painted this evening. If you can, have yourselves a very good evening. Good night.